how many times do you get invited to a meeting called Update? And do you wake up that morning and the first thing you think is, it's today? I mean, it just sounds awful. Update, you're just going to tell me what you did last week? I don't care.
Welcome to the Changing the Perception of Sales podcast. And today I'm delighted to say that we are joined by Andy Bounds. Andy, thank you very much for joining us today.
You're very welcome, Kyle. It's great to be here.
Really looking forward to the conversation. But to kick things off, as we always do, just for anyone tuning in and the listeners, please give us an introduction into who you are and what it is that you do.
Okay, so extremely quickly, but do feel free to ask me anything you want, Kyle. I help large companies to make more sales. That's my job. Some people call that sales consultant. Some people call it sales trainer. I've written books on this stuff. Some people call it sales author. But basically, ultimately, the reason I'm here is to help my customers make more sales. I have done it in lots of countries, like about 50 countries, worked with some massive companies. I'm very proud of that. The thing people find most interesting about what I do is my mum is blind. So when I was little, I became very good at explaining stuff. And as a salesperson, you need to be very good at explaining stuff. So we all like to have a little differentiator, don't we? Well, that's mine. I help people sell more quickly, and I've got a blind mum, so I can help you explain things. That's my job.
Brilliant. Great summary there. So if you're looking to sell more, this is definitely an episode for you. 50 countries. Which one's been your favourite to work or speak in?
America, I think. I mean, obviously, England to my English customers, but I really enjoy speaking in America. If someone likes what you say when I've been there, it's amazing. They come up and they're so effusive and they say, that's brilliant, I'm going to use it tomorrow, and thank you very much, and so on, and they write notes and there's loads of whooping. It's lovely. There are some places you speak and it's not really like that. Instead of saying, I'm going to use this tomorrow, they tend to say, oh, thanks a lot, I wish I'd known that last week, then I wouldn't have lost the sale. So I think I like the positivity and the future focus of my lovely American audiences.
Yeah, they definitely have that, particularly when it comes to sales as well, which must be great for the work that you do. And coming on to the things that you mentioned, and particularly want to talk around your growing up and how you introduced communication for your obviously relationship with your mum. But a lot of people might look at your LinkedIn, Andy, and they'd go, "Oh, hang on a minute, worked in accounting and finance, an accountant." How did you how did you transition from that to doing what it is that you do today?
Right, by absolute luck. So there you go. So anyone who wants a strategic, these are the 5 steps to do. Not really got those. What happened was I was at university, had a great time, but I ended university and I wasn't really sure what to do with my life. And so I thought I need to choose a job where whatever I do in the rest of my life, this job will be useful. So in the end, I thought, well, accountancy is quite good because I'm quite good with numbers, and it's always good to know a bit about finance. So I went for an accountancy job. I was lucky enough to work with the company called Grant Thornton. It was brilliant. I love working there. They're amazing people. But when I was there, I often found that if there was something that needed explaining, I'd often be the one to volunteer to explain it. They had an in-house training centre then. I don't know if they still do, but I volunteered to go and teach at that. So I was interested in accounting, but I became more and more interested in teaching. And then the company, or if you like, a college where I studied for my professional accountancy exams, a job came up there and I started working there instead. And so that was like the middle ground between accountancy and what I do now, because now I was actually teaching people how to pass their professional accountancy exams. And I started studying how people's brains work and how you can activate them with long-term memory and all that stuff. And that's where I came up with this idea of, it doesn't matter how good you are in the classroom, what matters is whether they pass their exams next week. So I became really focused on, but what about this? And but what about this? And then I remember I went to a presentation by a bank, because you get invited to loads of these things, in some fancy room with chandeliers. And it was this presentation. And Kyle, it was rubbish. It was really boring. There was loads of words on the slides. There was no benefits to the audience. The bank started off by telling me the year they were founded. I still don't care. And then they had a black and white photo of the first branch in London. Don't care about that. And it was rubbish. And I thought, why are you being so boring? I just don't understand why you'd be so boring. Why are you teaching people in such a boring way? And I didn't think anything of it. Then 2 or 3 days later, I went to a different presentation by a different bank, and that was worse. And then that was my moment. I suddenly thought, oh, well, people don't know how to explain stuff, do they? And then I went on a bit of a voyage, and I had a look at how different people explain different things, and I found most people don't have a blind mum, right? And so I just thought that people don't know how to explain things in the right order, And so then I set up on my own, and I've got an amazing partner called Emma, my wife, and she basically gave me the confidence to do it and was really supportive of it. And then the two of us just started, and that was 20 years ago, and here we are.
Here we are today. What a journey. And I'm really glad you said presentations, because that is something I do want to talk about a little bit later on where most presentations go wrong and what people can do to improve. But to talk about your blind mum then, that you've mentioned a couple of occasions now, what was that like growing up, and what did that teach you about communication at such a young age?
What was it like? Well, it was brilliant, really. I mean, my mum's ace. I mean, I'm lucky she's still around now. She's about to be 87.
Wow.
And we're very blessed. We're very close. And I remember as a kid, sometimes people would try and explain something to her, and she wouldn't quite understand it. It wasn't anyone's fault. It's just they weren't used to talking to her. And I remember as like 6, 7 years old, thinking to the person who was speaking, like, "Oh, if you just had said this, my mum would have been fine, and you would have been fine, and we wouldn't have had this embarrassment." And actually, Kyle, I think my adult job is quite similar to that. Sometimes I look at people and say, God, if you just said that a bit differently, then you and the customer will both have been happy, instead of you being a bit boring with your black and white photos of your first bank branch. And so I really sort of got into that. And I used to say to Mum, without realising that I was forensically studying this stuff, I'd say, so when I explain something, Mum, shall I say this first or this first? And how can I help you understand things? And some people will get things wildly wrong. Like I remember being in a coffee shop once, and someone said, there was me and Mum and this other person, they were very kindly buying us both a drink. And this person said to me, shouting a bit, "Does your mum take sugar in her coffee?" And I thought, firstly, she's blind, not deaf. And secondly, talk to her, not me. And people just don't know how to do it, right? It's not a thing. Why should they know how to do it? So I just became really fascinated with, because if you say something, sentence 3, if you put sentence 3 as sentence 1, then a blind person instantly gets it. And so I just sort of became a bit of a nerd about that, really, Kyle.
Love it. And if you had to kind of categorize then, maybe for salespeople listening to this, what actionable tips they can maybe take from your experiences there, because it sounds like maybe questioning to clarify maybe and a few other bits, what would be the actionable things from your experiences growing up that people can maybe implement into their day-to-day?
Oh, well, there's a few, but the first one I can summarise in 2 words, which is afters early. So what I mean by that is customers want why they are better off after you. So I don't want a website, but after the website, I'm going to make more sales, right? So I don't want a website, I want more sales. When I see a lawyer or an attorney, I don't want to see her, but after seeing her, I'm no longer going to jail. So it's not the attorney I want, it's just like no jail time. So people always want the afters, customers always want the afters. And why do I say the word early? Well, first impressions are really important. So afters are important and first impressions are important. So you say your afters early. So if you're writing a proposal to someone who wants to, I don't know, export into Belgium, don't call it our proposal, you call it how we'll help you export into Belgium. And if you're doing a sales presentation on slide 1, you don't call it credentials presentation, because both those words sound tedious. Instead, you call it how we'll help you export into Belgium. And if you do a meeting, what should the meeting title be? Is it meeting with Andy? No, it's meeting to agree the best way to get into Belgium. And when you start the meeting, you say, you want to get into Belgium? I've had some new ideas. Do you mind if I share them with you? And so basically everyone sees me and goes, oh, he's the guy who can help us get into Belgium. So a very simple thing for anyone listening to this is review the last 5 types of communication you've done. A proposal, an email, a meeting title, a presentation, a conversation, anything. And just ask yourself 2 words, afters early. Were there afters in there? And did they appear early? Because if you send a proposal to someone and it's called our proposal, you are already losing if your competitors have said, here's how you can get into Belgium. Yeah. However, if you say, here you can get into Belgium, you're ahead of people who haven't done that. So I know afters early sounds incredibly trite and childishly simple, but actually most people are terrible at that. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is to ask more questions. And we can talk about questions as long as you like. That's a bit of a nerdy topic of mine. Just ask more questions. So people sometimes say to me, Kyle, when I'm doing a presentation to the client, should I do slides or not? I go, I don't know. Ask the client what they want you to do. And they go, brilliant. And what are the main topics I should talk about? So I don't know. Ask the client what topics they want you to talk about. So I'm just a big believer. Just ask a few more times and you should be fine. So if you do afters early and you ask more questions, you're going to sell more than people who don't.
Brilliant. So afters early and ask more questions, and bringing it back, they are things that you obviously learned early on from communicating with your mum, kind of focus on what's next early on in the conversation and just questioning to clarify things if you're not sure, which when you think about it from a simple sense, sounds quite straightforward, but obviously a lot of people really miss the mark with it. again, a lot of stuff in there that I'm keen to talk about, particularly presentations, questions. There's something I actually heard you say recently that's very similar to the last couple of bits you said, where I think you referred to a client asking you, why should we choose you for this conference training? And I think your response was, I don't know. So to share with us a little bit more around that, because it's quite relevant to what you've just mentioned towards the end of that last answer.
Yeah, cool. And it's I know exactly the example you mean, though I do have this conversation quite a lot with people, and it ties in with questioning and afters. So I do a lot of conference speaking. Someone got in contact and said, Andy, I'm ringing around different speakers. We want you to do your pitch. Why should we hire you? And so the obvious answer to that is, well, I've been doing this for lots of years, and here's the black and white photo of my first bank branch and all that. But when they say, so why should we hire you? I just said, I don't know. And he goes, well, what do you mean? And I said, because I don't quite understand what you want your conference to achieve. Can I ask you a couple of questions and then I can tell you if I can help you? And he went, yeah, what do you want to know? I said, so talk to me about your conference. I want to know two things, who and what. So who's in the audience and what do you want them to do after it? So what do you want them to do after the conference? So they say, it's a group of salespeople and what we want to do afterwards is we want them to be better at selling our new product. I said, okay, so tell me more about that. So why aren't they selling it then? So what's the problem then? So what are the stumbling blocks then? So is it they don't believe in it or they don't have the right skills then? So who are the best people they could sell it to? So we just had a big chat about this. And so I remember the conference was on a Tuesday. So I said, so help me understand this. So if on the Wednesday they were able to do this, would you think your conference had been a success? And they said, God, that would be amazing. And I said, well, I can help you with that. And it was almost like, right, where do we sign? And they didn't know what year I was founded, and they'd yet to see the black and white photo of my first bank branch, because people don't care about me and my past, not really. They care about them and their future. So why should we hire for a conference? I've no idea. What do you want to happen after your conference? Oh, I can help with that. Now, if they'd said they want something to happen after the conference and I couldn't help with that, I could say, I'm really pleased I've asked because that doesn't sound like I'm the best person for you. I do know speakers who are very good at that. You might want to talk to this person and this person, but the best way I can help is by gradually, gracefully declining. Yeah, so I just love that question. I mean, why would I hire someone to speak at my conference? It depends what I want to achieve after it, right?
Love it. I think I love it just because it's so different to maybe what the majority of people would do. To come on to that a little bit then, just communication in generally now. Most people in response to that question, why we should pick you, why should we choose you, why should we hire you for this event? Most salespeople, as you said, they probably get on the defensive a little bit and go, this is why, this is why, this is why. Why do you think we communicate in a way like that, just in general as human beings or salespeople specifically?
Well, there's lots of things. I mean, one of them is like you follow the tribe, right? So you join a company and you think, oh, their presentations are a bit boring. And 6 months later, you're just doing this presentation that you thought was boring 6 months ago. So you follow the tribe. That's one thing. Another thing is the way it's taught. So when I teach my customers, the very first thing I teach them is about afters. So I say, right, go to the chat box. I want you to write down what your company's best selling point is. And they all write our people, our innovation, our technology, our brand. And then I teach them about afters, and then I say, right, now go in the chat box and write why I'm better off after you. And they say, you'll make more sales, you can retire earlier, you'll keep out of jail, you'll look good to your kids and all that stuff. And it's really nice because you say, look at the top of the chat box, look at the bottom of the chat box. And then they go, oh my word. I said, that's what you were doing, that's what you need to do. And so once it's pointed out, it's great, but I've never worked with a company ever, Kyle, ever, when I've said, what's your best selling point? Where people have said the best selling point is the afters we cause. Like, nobody talks like that. They just don't. So it's partly you follow the peers. It's partly how you're trained by people. And it's partly, I guess, just habits. So we all know what we like with habits. It's like when you clean your teeth in the morning. I imagine you put your toothbrush, let's say, in your right hand. You never think, oh, should I do right or left? Do I do left and right with my toothbrush? Do I go up and down? You just do stuff without thinking. Now, that's fine with your toothbrush because you don't want your brain occupied by, oh, how do I clean my teeth again? But it's not fine if you've got in bad habits with sales. So it's a lot to do with peers and how you talk, but ultimately just you get in bad habits.
Which we need to snap out of, which is what a lot of the stuff today is all around. So coming back to afters early, specifically with presentations, you said it before this and you've said it already today. You're absolutely right. So many presentations where we were founded in 1932, and as you said, no one cares. How would you recommend people that are doing a presentation maybe change that then? We talked about the title maybe, but in terms of the first 30 seconds, what would you advise?
Okay, first 30 seconds, it goes back to, at the end of this recording, people are going to say, if Andy Bounce says the word afters early and asks questions again, I'm just going to thump my computer. Right, so What you do is this. You start off with afters early. So you say, so don't say thank you for your time, because that's deferential. So you start with the word our. I've been looking forward to our conversation. So none of this thank you. They want someone who's useful, not someone who's grateful. They want a peer, all right? So they want a trusted advisor. They don't want you to say, I'm amazed you would see me with thank you for your time. So I've been looking forward to our chat. How are you? Start like that. And then I'd put up my first slide if I'm doing slides, or I'd say it verbally if I'm not. And I'd say, from our earlier conversations, the main priority we have here is how to get you into Belgium. That's what I think. Is that what you think? And they go, yeah, that's right. And then you say, so as we agreed last week, because I always ask what they want me to cover, I prepared 3 things to talk about, X, Y, and Z. Is that still what we're going to cover? Right, cool. So which of those should we do first? Because I don't mind. So if you like what I've said is, so overall it's our meeting, it's not thank you for your time. Then it's you want to get in Belgium, don't you? And then it's you said X, Y, Z, is that still the case? And then Kyle, I say, where do you want to start? And they say, well, let's start with Z. And then I say, okay, cool, just out of interest, why do you want to start with Z? They go, well, that's really important because... So I'm 30 seconds in. They've done more talking than I have. It's a peer-to-peer conversation, not a grateful salesperson. We're talking about Belgium. We've agreed the agenda. They've agreed what's going first. And they've told me why it's their priority. Now, that's not a bad start. Because my competitors are saying, look at the black and white photo and look at the map. And so it's afters early and it's asking questions. Now, those questions I've said are, this is the topic she said. Is that still right? Is there anything else? Where do you want us to start? Why do you want us to start there? Unless you have some immortal gift of the gab that nobody really has, you're not suddenly going to come up with those words in a presentation because it's stressful, right? So when you're preparing up front and you prepare your slides that everyone does, and you maybe prepare your talk track and do a run through, the other thing you have to prepare, Carl, in fact it's more important, is prepare the questions you're going to ask. Like, think in advance, what questions am I going to ask? Especially early. Because if you do afters early and ask questions early, all of a sudden you've got an afters-rich dialogue. But if you don't prepare questions, your nerves will probably take over and say, look at our map.
Love it. Some really actionable stuff there. And I think to go back to something you said earlier, the 5 last piece of communication you've sent, I think people listening to this should definitely review. And anyone that's doing or got a presentation coming up, I think there's some really valuable stuff there in terms of actionable insight to move away from how many offices you've got and how many employees you've got, and actually afters early is something that they can implement immediately. Sounds like there's a lot going on in Belgium as well, to be fair, Andy. So that's a good
absolutely. I want to go there myself.
Great market to go into. Questions then. You said 5-10 minutes ago, you could almost nerd out and go into questions all day long. So that's exactly what we're going to do. In your opinion, how can salespeople become better at asking questions?
Okay, at least 3 things. Okay, so I'll go through them very quickly. Number 1, ask questions about afters. I can explain that to you. Number 2, ask second questions. So make sure you delve deep. So do you notice before when I said, what do you want to happen after your conference? And they said, we want people to launch our new product. All right, you have to ask a second question. I don't go, oh right, fine, well hire me then. So you have to ask second questions. The best second question in the world, if anyone's making any notes, please write these 3 words down. Tell me more is the world's best question. So if somebody says we want our people to be better at selling our new product, go, oh, what do you mean by that? Tell me more. So anytime you say tell me more, people always tell you more. And when people talk about active listening, that's what active listening means, right? Ask extra questions. So either tell me more or any question begin with a question word like, what product? Who do you want to do this? Why is it so important? When do they need to start doing it? What have you tried so far? So how are you going to go about it? So don't do it like that aggressive list. Just do it in a really interactive, interested way. So number 1, afters-based questions. We can talk about that if you want. Number 2, second questions, the probing tell me more one. And number 3, the word wait. Sometimes you ask a good question and the customer doesn't answer it immediately. And what some people do is they step in and they just say, oh, what I meant was, so they don't like the silence. Well, I've never ever in my life, Kyle, heard about a salesperson who listened themselves out of a sale. All right? So if you ask a question and the customer's silent for a couple of seconds, you should wait. Now, WAIT is an acronym. I don't know if you know this. W-A-I-T. It stands for W-Y am I talking? Right? Just shut up. You've asked them a question. Don't be so rude as to interrupt their thought process. So my 3 things are afters-based questions, say tell me more a bit, and wait before they answer, and that will be a pretty good start.
Love it, especially that last one as well, because I think salespeople, they just hate silence and find it very awkward. But starting with the beginning then, you said afters-based questions. We spoke about afters a little bit. Specifically the questioning part, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so here's a great exercise for anyone who works in sales to do. It's, of all the things I've ever come up with, it's my favourite one. So there you go, Kyle. Get a 3-column table. In the left-hand column, write down one of the products that you want to sell. So let's say in my case, I do some sales training by webinar. So I would write in column 1 the word webinar. Right? Column 2, what you do is you list the afters of that product. So why are people better off after the product? Well, they'll make more sales and they'll save some time and maybe their proposal hit rate will go up and they'll get more referrals. And so I just write the afters people will get after my webinar. And then the third column is questions. And what you do now is you now create a sales question. But this is the clever thing. What you do is you don't use the words in column 1, the word webinar, because nobody wants a webinar. So a very bad sales question will be, Kyle, would you like a webinar? You go, no, I don't, you strange bald man. But you do want the stuff in column 2. So what I do is I create questions using afters words. So if I've said afters are, you'll make more sales more quickly, one of my questions could be, help me understand how you're doing with your sales. Are you happy with them? Or do you wish that one of 2 things was happening? Either you were making more of them or they were quicker. Yeah, so what if you like more sales and quicker sales? I'm turning it into a question. Or I could say, if you could have one thing, would you want more sales or faster sales? Yeah. Or given how good your company is, do you make as many sales as you think you should, as quickly as you think you should? So in other words, I'm asking questions about sales and speed. So if I was doing, if I wanted to talk about one of my products, which is like my wonderful proposals thing. So I've got a proposal hit rate of 94%. So I'm a bit annoyed about the 6%, but 94 is pretty good. So I help people have a better success rate with the proposals. So my question might be, for that particular product, when you look at your proposals, I have 2 questions. Number 1, do you win as many as you think you should? And number 2, are sometimes they a pain to write. And people always go, we don't win as many, and they are a pain to write. And can you see that if you start with questions about the afters, they give their answer and you go, oh, that's interesting, tell me more. Yeah, and then 5 minutes later you can say, I can help with that. Do you mind if I tell you how I helped somebody else? I think it might be interesting to you. And so you almost use the afters to lead in. So the way you come up with afters-based questions, Kyle, is number 1, what's your product? Number 2, what are its afters? And number 3, turn those afters, fiddle with the words, and so they become a question, and that's what you ask.
Cool. Another great exercise for people to do and focus on column 2 for sure. Something I was really interested about in everything you've said there, some really good examples of questions based on afters. This is more my general curiosity here. A lot of the questions you asked, we get taught a lot in, it has to be open questions. A lot of the questions you said were closed questions and really quite specific, obviously and relevant to the afters. Just talk us through maybe the thinking and maybe the theory and concept behind that.
Yeah, cool. So people will often say open questions are good, and they almost say in such a way that closed questions are bad. And I don't agree with that. Closed questions, yes, people don't open up as much. That's why they're called closed questions. But the good thing about closed questions is they're easy to answer. So I prefer what I think of clop, like CL and then OP, like a little horse going clip clop. So think of clop, CL and OP. So I ask closed and then open it up. So I do close to start with because it gets people speaking, and then I open it up. So I might say something like, do you wish your sales were more or faster? That's closed. The only answers to that are, I want more, I want faster, I want both, or neither because we're nailing it. They're the only answers to that. And so it's impossible not to answer. But if I was to ask a very open question like, tell me overall where you wish your company was 8 years from now, it's just too open. So sometimes it's too hard for people to... So I find if you do clop, it's much better. So I start off by saying, do you want more or faster? And they go faster. And then I open it up and say, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Well, Andy, open. And then, oh, so can you give me an example then? More and more open. So the way I speak, it's almost like, imagine knocking on a door, right? And so it's like you rat-a-tat and then the tats, it's just like... So the way I speak is I speak quite a lot to start with, and then I speak less and less because they speak more and more. So, do you want X or Y? I want X. Why is that? Da-da-da. Go on. Can you give me an example? Yep. So, I definitely love open questions, but I generally will ask a closed question first just to get them speaking. Like, did you notice before my example with the presentation? You said you want to get in Belgium. Is that still right? You said you want me to do X, Y, Z. Is that still right? Which of X, Y, Z do you want me to start with? Oh, tell me why you want to start with that then. And now we open it up because they're talking. So I don't agree that open is good and closed is evil. I think closed and open is usually the best way to do it.
Good stuff. Glad I asked as well, because I think people sometimes feel like it's a cardinal sin to be asking a closed question, and it's not the case. It's just knowing when is the right time. So that's step number one then, after early questions, specifically around them. You then said around probing and kind of tell me more, being really powerful. When should we, or when do we know when to actually probe for a bit more information?
Well, if in doubt, probe. And then, if in doubt again, probe again, right? So, what I really like is I like having 3 or 4 probing questions in mind, like tell me more, why is that so important? I have 4 questions which have the word priority in. So, after people have begun to tell me stuff, I'll then say, so could you explain why is this a priority? How much of a priority is it compared to other things you're doing? Who's it a priority for? Is it just you, or is it other people? And when's it a priority? In other words, when do you need it sorted by? So I love having all these questions in my mind. So you probe, but as you're beginning to think, I'm beginning to understand this now, then I start thinking, well, how much of a priority is this? And then the nice thing about that is there'll become a point where you think, I've got a pretty good idea what they want now. And then you then need to pivot into talking about yourself. So what you can either do is you go straight into your products and say, well, I can help with that. For example, we have this platform. Or what you can do, and this is my preferred way of doing it, you can use stories. So I probe a bit until I've got something, and then I use a story and I say, oh, do you know what? You sound exactly like Olivia. Olivia is one of my customers. Said exactly the same thing that you just said, pretty much. And we started working together 6 months ago, and she's already made sales of over £15 million. Do you mind if I share with you what I shared with her? Because I think it might help. So that's how I pivot. So I go, you sound like Olivia. She's one of my customers. And then did you notice, even when I tell the story of Olivia, afters early, I didn't say we did some webinars and some coaching and then proposal guidance and we rewrote this and we did referrals. All I said was, you sound like Olivia. She's earned £15 million of sales. That's the afters of me. So I go straight. So when you do a case study, you go straight to the afters. You don't say, and then we did, and then we did, and then we did, right? So you ask your questions. You do your why, who, what, where, when, tell me more, and all that stuff. And when you think it's appropriate, you say, you sound like one of my other customers. They said exactly the same thing, and I've helped them get £15 million of sales. Would you mind if I explain to you what we did? I think it might help. Everyone, Carl's going to say, yeah, go on. And then I say, well, there's 2 things, really. Something was called a webinar, and something was called my proposal thing. Which of those you want to talk about? Talk about your proposals, will you, Andy? And now we're talking about my product. And that's what you call, you don't lead with your product, you lead the conversation towards your product. All right? So you don't say, I'll tell you about my webinar, sit down, shut up, look at this photo of a bank. What you do is you ask questions about what people wish their world was like. Then you say, I've helped somebody else have a world like that. Do you mind if I tell you how? And then they go on, fill your boots. And now we can do my feature dump now.
Brilliant. Love it. So coming back to the probing, it's all around, if you're unsure, always probe for more if in doubt, which I think is very good. All I've got now is black and white pictures of banks in my head as well. Thinking of all the different branches that have fallen. The final bit then was, why am I talking? Wait. Salespeople across the land probably don't even know they're guilty of this a lot of the time. So again, just what advice would you give to salespeople to get better at waiting and pausing?
Yeah, I love what you said there. In my experience of talking to salespeople on this, and I am one, so I'm not like casting aspersions because I am one. Most, if not all, salespeople think they're above average at this, right? So they think they're really pretty good at not interrupting, and they're really pretty good at not talking too much, and they've all heard 2 ears and 1 mouth and use them in that proportion. And pretty much everyone thinks they're above average. And then you have to point out as tactfully as you can that that's not how averages work. Right? Half of us are worse than average because that's what averages are. So we all think we're better at average, but half of us aren't. So half the people listening to us now are worse than average. Not being nasty, it's just what averages are. So what we have to do is we have to get some feedback if we can to see if we're as good at this as we think we are. And the easiest way to do this is just ask someone you trust and someone you like to listen into you, right? So if you do phone selling, just ask your mate to listen in, yeah? If you do face-to-face selling, take someone with you, like, take a pre-sales person or a technical person, or take your sales manager with you, And the main thing, just say before we go, just let me know afterwards, do you think I'm good at listening or do you think I interrupt them too much? So get some feedback from someone else. If you don't want to include someone else, but you do, for example, in your company do call recordings, listen to the call and see, and there's some software that can track who speaks most and all that stuff. So you've got to find out, it's not enough to assume that you are above average, because half of us aren't. You need some input, either from technology or from someone else.
Brilliant. I think it's interesting now because when we're listening to calls or people pitching, a lot of time we focus on maybe the questions of actual pitch. Maybe we should pay more attention to how much listening we're actually doing. So I think that's a really valid and interesting point. Moving on from questions then, some really good, and I like the three kind of pillars really that you mentioned there. I want to talk about one of your favourite subjects, Andy, which is meetings. Why don't you share with everyone your thoughts and opinions on meetings?
Okay, when this gets boring after an hour and a half, feel free to interrupt me. Brilliant meetings are brilliant. Okay, brilliant meetings are like a pit stop in a Formula One thing. They enable your car to go faster. They don't take very long. Everyone knows what their role is, and it's brilliant. And if you didn't have it, things would be worse. So I'm not saying all meetings are evil. Like, some of them are really, really good. But my word, a lot of them are rubbish. Not just sales meeting, internal meetings. I mean, how many times do you get invited to a meeting called Update? And do you wake up that morning and the first thing you think is, it's today? I mean, it just sounds awful. Update, you're just going to tell me what you did last week? I don't care. Yeah? And then we're going to hear from Jemima. I don't even like Jemima. And then we're going to hear from Brian. Well, Brian's job's nothing to do with my job. I just can't be doing with it. I just hate it. So what happens with many meetings is they're too historic. So people talk about what happened last week too much. And they're too boring and there's not enough action. I can't abide them. So when you're having your weekly sales meeting where you talk about deals, this is a good example. So let's say you and I are the only people in this meeting, and it starts off and I say this, okay, I've got a new opportunity this week, it's with Windmill Company. And Windmill Company, they were founded like 10 years ago, they think they might want webinars, they're not quite sure. I'm talking to somebody called Gary, Gary's quite interested in us and he used to work with someone else, he's heard me because of this. Like, all this stuff is just noise, there's nothing you can do with that. Like, nothing you can do with that. So instead, when you have these meetings, you should always think about the future. This is like afters nerd here. Always think about the future. And every time you talk about, for example, a sales deal in a sales meeting, start with the who do. So in other words, going in the future, who at the client do you want to do what next? So imagine if I started the meeting like this. So I want to talk about my opportunity with Windmill Limited. My who do is, the next thing is I need Brian to reply to the email I sent yesterday. Yeah? Once Brian's done that, the next 3 steps we need to do are this. Now, can you hear straight away that's more interesting to you than the tedious background? But people don't do it. All right? So sales deal meetings are just basically tedious history lessons, right? Instead of being like action-focused who-do stuff. When you have internal meetings, which are updates... Sorry, I'm ranting now. Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, right. This is very nice. I'm not sure if this helps our audience, but my word, it's making me feel better. Like, when you have an update, just don't talk for 5 minutes about everything you've done. Nobody cares. I remember hearing, do you remember the blankety blank, that thing that used to be on telly, and like it goes blankety blank, blankety blank, blankety blank? When you're in an update meeting, replace blankety blank with nobody cares. And I want you to sing that when people are talking about last week. Just nobody cares, nobody cares, nobody cares. Because nobody cares. Like, so when you do an update meeting, instead of having a 5-minute nobody cares rant, just do 30 seconds. 30 seconds on best next help. What I mean by best next help is this. So if you said to me, Kyle, Andy, give us an update about last week, I'd say it was pretty good. Best thing we achieved, Kyle, was we signed that deal. Next week, the main priority is this. One thing I could do with a bit of help with is like, Brian's not coming back to me after I sent the proposal. Have you got any tips for me? Now, can you see in those 30 seconds? That's all you need to know. Like, what's working, what I'm doing next, I want to help with. So imagine if I did 30 seconds, you did 30 seconds, 2 other people did 30. It's just 2 minutes, just quick. But people don't do this. They rock up to meetings, it's always boring, and then they say everyone hates it, and then I say, what are you going to do next week? They say, oh, we'll just do the same thing again. Like, why? Anyway, thanks, Kyle. I feel better.
All right, well, good. Rant over as well. Yeah, I knew you were passionate about that subject. So not only now is it pictures of banks, it's also nobody cares coming up as well, which I absolutely love. It's got a nice ring to it. So on that then, I'm going to share an example from ourselves and get a little bit personal with this, because I'm sure businesses will be listening to this, people listen to this, and they'll go, yeah, we do that in our business. Yeah, that happens. It does. I think it happens at most places. So a lot of managers will do one-to-ones on a weekly basis. They may have a team catch-up. The team or the individuals come there and they will give a review of their performance the week before. It could be metrics, KPIs, meetings, whatever it may be. Again, actionable. How would you advise any managers or even sales rep listening to this? How can they structure that meeting differently to make it much more effective?
Okay, be really clear with your guidance on what you want. So when we talk about closed and open, the managers often ask very open questions. Give us an update, how you're doing. It's too open. Instead, be really closed and say, I want to hear how you're doing, but you've got 30 seconds maximum, and I want to know your best next help. Yeah? Or, I want you to tell me how you're doing with Windmill Limited, 30 seconds maximum, but start with a who do. Don't tell me anything else. Yeah? So be really clear with the briefing. Be clear on exactly what you want to know, and be clear on some sort of idea of timing. Now, it doesn't have to be 30 seconds, and it doesn't have to be best next help. It can be whatever you want, but you can be much clearer on it. Yeah? I tend to find that these meetings almost could be emails because they just swap some information. Like, I talk about Windmill Limited for 5 minutes and you just watch me do it, and then you talk about like whatever for 5 minutes and I watch you do it. I mean, that could have been 2 emails and nobody cares. So as a manager, be very clear on kind of time expectations and exactly what you want to know. Be very clear. If they rant on, I'm going to be rude to managers here. If they rant on, that's your fault. Yeah? You call the manager, you're supposed to manage it. Yeah? So if it's your meeting and even you hate it, well, who's going to change that then? Right, it's your fault. And if you don't like the word fault, say responsibility. Okay, it means the same thing. Like, just do something about it. And if you want, just blame Kyle. So you say, I was listening to this podcast with this guy called Kyle the other day, and on there, this guy said that when we do meetings, he said we should maybe do this. Why don't we just try it next week? Let's just try it. We learned it on a podcast. And if it doesn't work, blame stupid Kyle and his stupid podcast. And if it does work, then it's all my fault because I'm the manager and I'm amazing. So just like use us as the Trojan horse if you need to, but I promise you this, if you give people too open a brief, they will be too historic, and they'll be too boring, and they'll be too broadcast instead of broad listen. Do you know what I mean? What I want from a sales meeting, you're an experienced guy, Cal, you're really good at this. I want to hear from you your advice on how I can close my deal. So I actually want you to chip in, but if I just broadcast what I did, you can't chip in because there's nothing for you to add.
So that's where best next help come in and who do as well. Five really simple words.
Yeah, best next help or who do. I mean, with who do, sometimes what I'll do is I'll say, right, so Kyle, that deal with Windmill Limited, I want you to do 2 things. Maximum a minute, less if you can. I want to know the who do in clarity. So don't start off by telling me what Windmill Company do. Don't tell me anything at all. The first thing you're going to say is my who do is I want Brian to ring me back. Right, start off with that. And the second thing I want you to tell me is the blocker. What do you think is the biggest blocker to the deal? They're the only 2 things I want to know. Anything else you tell me, I'm going to start hitting you. That's it. So if you say, I want Brian to ring me back because I'm being ghosted, and the biggest blocker is Brian's wife doesn't like me very much. Right, now if you start off with that, then as a group, we can help you. So, Brian's ghosting you, is he? Have you tried this? Have you tried this? What have you tried so far? Well, I did this. Do you want to try this? And Brian's wife doesn't like you. Well, have you tried this? Have you tried this? Maybe Brian doesn't like his wife either. And so, if you do the who do and the blocker, we can have a rich conversation about that, which is interesting to us, and it helps you.
Brilliant. Like it. So the who do is very important. It's similar to what you said about presentations as well. People don't really care around the history, when they were founded, what they do. And the same principle really applies for a lot of these internal meetings too. How long would you advise you put these meetings in for? Because a lot of the time it might be an hour, whatever it may be. How long would you recommend?
Okay, so I have a personal... I'm just a pretty grumpy, cantankerous old sod, I'm realising on this podcast. Like, I don't like meetings that automatically get booked in for a multiple of 30 minutes because I think it's no thought's gone into it. So what people do is they put in... So I like the way that your podcasts are like 45 minutes-ish. They're not like an hour, you know. So people often just put in an hour or 30 minutes or 90 minutes because that's how Outlook is split. And then they think, oh, that meeting dragged on. In fact, they all drag on. So what I suggest you do is you make it as punchy as you can. And I would much rather have meetings that are 20 or 40 minutes rather than 30 and 60. So I always want it as short as possible. So someone listening to this might currently have an hour. If you were to be honest and say, of that hour, what percentage of that hour is people giving background to the deals that, frankly, we don't really all need to know. You'd be surprised how much time is taken up in that. It might be half an hour. Yeah. So you'll find the time savings are huge if you do it that way. So why don't, for next time, anyone listening to this, just try it. Blame Kyle. Don't blame me. Blame Kyle. And say, next time, instead of the hour, we're going to do two differences. You're going to do hoodoo and blockers. That's all we want to know. And the whole meeting's capped at 45 minutes. So we're just going to try and be more useful and more punchy. And just try that, right? If it works, brilliant. If it doesn't work, that's what we call teething difficulty. Either sack it off or try it again.
Cool. So if it works, it's all on you, Andy. If it doesn't work, blame me. We'll go with that as a fair plan of action. Yeah, that's. But I think that, again, the logic, it just seems really simple and logical. Book your meetings in for how long do you think you actually need for the topics you will be discussing, rather than just the pre-settings that Outlook already has, which is 30, 60, 90 minutes or whatever it may be. Last thing on kind of actionable sales tips before we go into a couple of final bits. You mentioned ghosting then, actually, and something I wanted to touch on, probably more so with email communication, but just in any type of communication in general. A lot of people listening to this in sales will have always been victim to just not hearing back from a prospect. What are your thoughts / advice for people that might be experiencing that?
Okay, cool. So there's two pieces of advice I would give to start with, and we do more if you want, but the main two are this. Number one is in advance, number two is in arrears. So you can get ghosted not just by prospects, but by customers, right? You have a meeting with them and it all sounds glorious and then they don't ring you back. So there's one thing you can do in advance to minimize the chance of being ghosted. So if I'm meeting with you in Starbucks now, we're having a lovely chat, then I always close every single sales meeting I have, like everyone, 100% of them, not 99, 100% of my sales meetings that I want to meet someone again, end with the two Ds. And the 2D stands for do and date. And the do is what we're doing, so what actions are we going to take? And the date is, during meeting number one, we schedule the date of meeting number two. So at the end it goes something like this. Right, Kyle, so this is great. I think I know what we're doing next. Let's just have a quick chat about our actions. If I do this, would you find that helpful? Anything else you want me to do? Right, while I'm doing this, Kyle, can you do this for me? Okay, that's great. Also, while we're both together with our diaries and our phones now, let's just schedule the next meeting. It's much easier when we're together rather than doing it by email, isn't it? Don't want to play email tennis. And you'll go, right, fine. So you book your meeting two while you're together. And then, and this is a little top tip, what you then do is you say to them, right, so we'll put it in for next Wednesday, 10 o'clock. What should we call it, Kyle? And you'll go, what do you mean? I say, well, like, what should we call the meeting? I mean, you want to get into Belgium. Should we just call it how to get into Belgium - meeting 2? So I want the title of the meeting to be afters early. So I ask the customer, what date are we next meeting, and what should we call that meeting? And if they give me a crappy thing, I'll say, well, what about doing something about your afters? All right. So now it's in the diary. They've agreed to it, and they've agreed to the title of it. And I'll send them a little note the day before the meeting with the word new in it. And I'll say, real looking forward to tomorrow's meeting. I've had a couple of new ideas based on what we talked about last week. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Bye. So you are, I'm not saying eliminating, but you're minimizing the chance of being ghosted if you do that. Okay? So the two Ds in the meeting, and then the day before, say the word new. All right? Sometimes you do get ghosted, though, so how do you do things in arrears? There's various ways to do it, but again, the word new is often the best thing. So if you didn't get back to me when I did thing X, if I send a chasing email saying, get back to me, Kyle, well, there's nothing new in there. So if you didn't get back to me because of X, you're not suddenly going to get back to me because I asked you again, right? So therefore, the word new is very useful. So if you didn't get back to me when I thought you would, I will do a retrospective thing, and I'll say something like, oh, Kyle, since we met last week, I've been thinking about it, I've been asking around, and I found a couple of new things that will help you with Belgium. They'll make a lot more sense verbally than they will by email, so I'll just give you a quick buzz at 4 o'clock. If that time doesn't work, text me a different time. So can you hear what I'm doing here? I'm using the word new. Then I'm saying, I'll call you at this time. I don't say, so can we get together? I say, I'll call you at this time. And then my question is not, is that okay, Kyle? My question is, if 4 o'clock doesn't work, text me a different time. In other words, I'm bloody ringing you. So it's not 4, tell me 3. And so there's a lot of stuff there. So if someone's listening to this, you might want to just rewind the last 2 minutes because there's loads of stuff to minimize the chance of getting ghosted. Nail it up front. Do the 2 Ds and send a note the day before the next meeting. But if you are struggling, then what you do, say I've got some new information, I'll call you at 4, tell me a different time if that doesn't work for you.
Cool, love it. Yeah, I would definitely recommend rewinding it as well. There's a lot of actionable things in there. A couple of things that I'd take away as well. What I really liked was getting the prospects or the customer to actually share their thoughts on the title of the meeting as well. I think it's quite thought-provoking, engages them, and gets a little bit of commitment from their side. So that's definitely one takeaway that I took from that for sure. Last thing on kind of ghosting and email communication. What a lot of people end emails with, Andy, is please don't hesitate to get in touch if you've got any questions. Just give me a shout if there's anything you need, or different iterations of that. How would you switch that up if you were a salesperson listening to this?
Okay, so a salesperson listening to this, I'm going to blow everyone's minds with Andy's golden rule of influencing. Here you go, everyone. If you want someone to do something, you have to ask them to do something. There you go. I mean, if this is too advanced, we can say that again, right? But if you want someone to do something, you have to ask them to do something. So if you send an email and want people to reply to you, then say, please could you hit reply and? Yeah? And to get a more likely chance of response, and then you add, and then I will afterwards. So I might say to you, Carl, so please could you hit reply and tell me whether you want X, Y, Z, and then I will do da-da-da-da-da. Bye. So please do this and then I'll do that. That's the best way to end an email. And the analogy here is the other day I wanted one of my kids to go to bed. So I said to him, if you got any questions, please don't hesitate to call. And he didn't go to bed. And I realised because I hadn't asked him anything. So I thought, well, how do most people end? It doesn't work. How do most people end presentations? So I said to him, what you see on most people's last slide. Thank you for your kind attention. And he still didn't go to bed. And I thought, well, how do people end meetings? Any other business? And he still didn't go to bed. And I realised that virtually every communication has two massive problems with it, the start and the end. The start has to be afters early. You need to engage people early, whether it's a meeting, a conversation, you've got to start early. And the end, you've got to ask someone to do something. All right? So if you want this in forward, start afters, end do. Right? You have to ask someone to do something. So the way you end an email is, please can you do X and then I'll do Y. The only time you don't do that is the actions with you. And you end with, unless you tell me otherwise, I'll do this. All right? So if I'm doing a prospecting email, I'll end with, I'll give you a call tomorrow for us to chat about this. So I'll take the action. If you say, I'll leave it with you, or please don't hesitate to call, that's just like saying to a child, please don't hesitate to call and wondering why they haven't gone to bed.
Again, really simple, but I think they're the most effective things. Because a lot of people, again, you say, I might be thinking, oh, why is this person not getting back to me? Or why have they not done this? Probably because we never actually asked them to in the first place. So really, really simple. Kind of wrapping up now, Andy, lots of really good stuff in there. I know I'll be making a few notes and taking plenty of takeaways from this conversation. To bring it back to the title of the podcast and kind of why we're even having these conversations in the first place is all around to change the perception of sales. I think a lot of the things you've talked about today is just quite thought-provoking and maybe how salespeople can approach their day-to-day and the communication that they have. Just interested to know, what was your perception of the sales industry? Because obviously working as an accountant, what was your kind of outsider looking in perception of the industry when you first started?
Well, I used to think, you know the phrase sales is a dirty word. I used to have that thing. Like, so you'd sometimes see things on telly that, like say The Apprentice. Like I'm sorry, a lot of people, I always hated The Apprentice because it was a bit like sell at all costs and it just felt a bit like bullying, salesing. I mean, so a lot of people love it, so please don't kick off. But I just don't like, I think sales is a joint lovely thing that you do with a customer that results in them giving you a bit of money so they get lots of afters. That's it. So it does like bounce, that phrase, but sales is a joint thing, definitely. If it works well, you get a bit of money, yeah, but their life is changed. So, for example, if you go in a florist, it's very easy to think like, okay, I need to buy the flowers. But actually, if you're buying flowers because you want to propose to your partner at the weekend, you might get a yes with that, right? That is worth more than the flowers. So, yes, you spent £20 on some flowers, but you've got like a yes, and you're going to spend the rest of your life with these people, right? So, the thing is, sales is great if it's done right. And the trouble with the word sales is it's from our point of view because we're the seller, so it sounds like you're doing it to someone. So cross out the word sales and put the word thump. It's like you're selling, you're thumping. But instead, if you think of it as a joint thing, and the way I see it is this, we have this future, the afters, the thing the customer wants, and the customer and I are going to walk towards this happy future holding hands, and we're going to work together to achieve these afters. And if we do that in a way that delights them, yes, I might make a bit of money, but they have so much more value out of it than I do. And I probably could, it's like the Pretty Woman thing, you know, I would have accepted 2,000. Well, I would have paid 4,000. If you get it right, in many ways, the customer would have paid more, and the supplier would have taken less. So it's a joint thing. It's a lovely thing. You're not doing it to someone. You're not thumping. You're finding the afters, and if you can help them, you help them. And if you can't help them, you say, I'm really glad I've asked because I don't think I'm the best person for you. But if you know someone good, you point them in the right direction. So you just act with this abundant mindset, and everyone benefits.
Love it. A lot of good stuff in there. My belief of the word afters has completely changed from today as well. It used to be a thing you have at dessert or maybe go up for seconds after food. But one final question on that, Andy, then, to kind of summarise, really. Anyone listening to this that is maybe considering what to go into, and sales is something they've maybe not given that much thought to, or maybe someone that's in sales right now and maybe having a tough time, what would you say to them on why you believe sales is a great career?
Well, I mean, it's a great career if it's for you. It's not for everyone. That's really important. So certain things that you have to like if you want to be in sales. One of them is you need a sense of keeping going. So there's a sense of, I call perseverance. So a bit of persevering, but a bit of resilience. You do need some of that because you do have to keep going. And I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm very happy with my levels of success. But every financial year, we start again. So there is a sense of here we go again. So you have to have that about you. It needs a sense of optimism, because you will get some people who say no to you. That's fine. It's not a failure on your part. It's not a failure on their part. It's just not right. That's fine. That's okay. And so what I would suggest is, do you like talking to people? Are you interested in other people? Do you think usually days will be fine? That sort of thing. So if you have that stuff in you, it's definitely worth talking about. We all do selling without realising it. The best salesperson I've ever met is child 4. We don't give our kids names, Kyle. He's 11, and he's just brilliant at it. And he doesn't know he's doing it because he's just a kid, but he's brilliant at doing it. Because he just gets his own way most of the time. I was talking to a lady who wanted some coaching recently because she'd just been on maternity leave, and she said, to be honest, I've just lost a bit of confidence because I've not been in the corporate land for a bit. And we talked about it. And I said, tell me a bit about your kids and stuff. And as the conversation went on, I found out this woman was really good at persuading her kids to tidy their bedroom and to go to bed on time. And they ate their greens. I said, if you can do all that, you're one of the best salespeople in the world. So it's not new skills you need. You're just mapping across existing skills. Yeah? If you can get your kids to do that stuff, you can convince somebody to buy some flowers. It's not. So I would just say to people, sales is not a dirty word. It's a lovely thing, but you definitely need perseverance. You definitely need optimism. You definitely need to like talking to people. You definitely need to be quite sort of motivated. But if you do it and it's for you, it is just the most rewarding thing. I like the money it's given me, but I love the afters it's given my customers.
Andy, what a great way to finish the episode. Thank you very much for joining us and helping change the perception of sales.
No, you're welcome. I've enjoyed it. Thanks, Kyle.